Welcome to the Geek Homeworld. I am your host, Ed, aka Savage Tech Man. We talk sci-fi, TV, movies, superheroes, and all from a geek perspective. You can find us on Blogger, Google+, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. We're everywhere. Join the Geek Homeworld. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Ed, and welcome to a little bit of a different episode here of the Geek Homeworld podcast. If you're listening, wherever podcasts are found, you'll be hearing this. It's best viewed on YouTube at Geek Homeworld, where you can subscribe and give thumbs up and enable notifications on our videos in our channel there. We really appreciate that at Geek Homeworld on YouTube. And anyway, the reason why you want to see this and the reason why you're here, especially if you're on YouTube, is that you want to know 10 strategies for starting a podcast. And that is the title of this particular episode of the Geek Homeworld podcast and the accompanying video that's on Geek Homeworld on YouTube. So anyway, let me tell you a little bit about myself, and I promise I'm going to jump right into this and not a long intro. I host a show called Savannah on Film where I interview people in the film industry. It is available in podcast form wherever you get your podcasts. There's also a Facebook page, okay? And there's the Geek Homeworld podcast that you're listening to. It's wherever you get your podcast. It's on Facebook. And there's a page there you can like and follow as well. And it's also a YouTube channel here where you're watching this video. Then I also like gaming, so I've started doing Geek Homeworld Gaming, which is not in podcast form yet, but it is on Facebook Gaming, so it's Geek Homeworld Gaming on Facebook, and you can like and follow that page there and thumbs up the videos. But I've been cross-posting the videos where I game, my live streams, over to this channel on YouTube, Geek Homeworld. So basically, if you go to Geek Homeworld on YouTube, subscribe, enable notifications for new content, and give thumbs up on the videos, you're going to see a different playlist with either gaming or different things like that. If you're interested, by the way, in Savannah on Film, it has its own YouTube channel that you can like, subscribe, follow there, and thumbs up those videos and whatever else you want to do on YouTube. But anyway, so I promised to get all that out of the way there. But that tells you a little bit about myself. I'm a sound mixer. I've always been in the sound, a radio show host, as I said, and I just thoroughly enjoy sound. I'm a noisy person, but I've just always had a passion for radio, and so it came out of that, and then going into the film industry and working on a lot of films has been really invigorating to my creative spirit. So why are we here? We're here for 10 strategies for starting a podcast. And so I know no other way but to get into it by just doing it. So let's jump in. And I'm showing you here, if you're watching the video, you can follow along. And as we kind of discuss these 10 strategies for starting a podcast. And this is as of 2020. So this, of course, may change. And this may not be a comprehensive list that, I could break this down into several episodes, each of these particular 10 items, but I'm just trying to give you a bit of an overview. Now, I'm going to go on the assumption that you have decent equipment. From a sound mixer perspective, I will tell you sound is everything. And from a podcaster as well, of course, sound is everything, especially if it's an audio podcast, but audio and video. So forgive me if this video doesn't come out perfectly the way I want it, because I'm going to have to do some editing, and that's a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but I'm learning it. So hopefully you'll be kind with those thumbs up and those comments. But 10 strategies for starting a podcast. Number 1, you want to decide what your podcast is going to be about, and you want to plan before you take that leap. So what do I mean by that? a lot of people will say, stop planning. And I've done this. Trust me, I've been a perfectionist to the point where, I will spend hours and days planning out an episode. And early on when I was podcasting, and then I was like, it's not rocket scientist. Of course you want to be prepared. You want to have a sort of outline so you know your flow of time and how things are going on and that all that stuff. And that's very important. Don't get me wrong. Please don't get me wrong on that. But what I'm saying is you need to know what your podcast is about. So some people call it the elevator pitch. Okay, if you ran into someone in the elevator, well, these days during COVID-19, of course, you probably don't want to be in an elevator unless you're wearing a mask, but let's just, that aside, pandemic aside, okay? Let's say you run into someone and they say, hey, what's your podcast about? And you have to give them that tagline, as we say in the film industry, or, what your film is about. So what is your podcast about? And so you do not start podcasting without knowing your destination or journey, right? Because podcasting isn't necessarily a destination. It's more of a journey. And whether, podcasting is really started as kind of like syndicated radio, if you think about it. So it lives in perpetuity, I suppose. And, it's kind of on demand whenever you want it, it's there. So it's one of the things I love about podcasting. There's less rules. There's more rules than there used to be. But, you want to have good sound. You want to have all that stuff. And we'll talk about equipment in a minute, okay? But you got to know where you're going with it. So you basically need to know what your podcast is about. You need to know that little elevator pitch, okay? So number 2, this goes in with that. Know your niche or niche. I'm not going to say niche, okay? You want to narrow it down, kind of telescope it down, as I say, your theme of your podcast as most specifically as you can. So you want to get to that point. Let's say you're talking about, you have a podcast about geeks. Let's say the Geek Homeworld. Let's say if I started tomorrow, okay, knowing what my niche is, I started making videos about me planting flowers. Some people might like that, but guess what people come to this channel for? They come to this channel for anything that's part of the geek culture. Now, in some ways, I guess it could be geeky to to plant stuff. Who knows? Maybe somebody right now, a light bulb went off and they're gonna, start planting things. But generally, when you think of a geek podcast, you don't think about planting flowers. So, as rewarding as that can be, it's just, not within your niche. So you want to be mindful of your niche, okay? And then you have to, number 3 on our list here is make episodes dedicated to that niche. And you want to serve that niche and only that niche directly. Do not veer off topic. Now, that doesn't mean you can't go off on a tangent when you're talking about whatever you are in your niche. But what I'm referring to specifically is if your podcast is about, geeks and stuff like that, or the geek culture, as this one is, you don't want to start talking about how to plant different types of flowers, because that's veering off from your niche. So you want to serve that niche and stay on that topic of what your niche is. And that's a great way that you build community, you build followers, and you build people that are interested in your content and that can't wait for your content. And it's not about the number of subscribers you have. The more subscribers, yes, the better. But it's, and I forgot exactly how it's been said, but it's much better to have 10 followers, to have 50 followers, to have 100 followers, than to have millions of followers that are not engaged. You want to have those 5, 10, 50, 100 followers that are engaged in your podcast, that care about when your podcast releases a new episode. And, when you've got new content coming out, or especially if you don't, they may ask you via your social media, hey, when are you putting out a new episode? And that's something else that we're going to talk about making sure you put out your podcast in a timely manner. Once you establish a set schedule, you want to stick to that. So one of the things that you have to decide on is a hosting site, okay? Someplace that's basically going to host your podcast, that's going to be the storage for it, and then we'll distribute it out to, if it's iTunes or excuse me, Apple Podcasts, if it's Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast from, you have to have a hosting site. Now, if you notice here, if you're watching the video, you'll see that it says own your RSS feed. Now, your RSS feed is basically your podcast, okay? And I personally use in any companies or products I mention here. No one's sponsoring this video, so no one's telling me what to say or paying me. But I personally have used Libsyn for this entire podcast, which has been going as of 2020. The Geek Homeworld's been going for 6 years. So I've been with Libsyn. Before that, I was with them I had a podcast for about 6 years, for 6 years exactly. It was the Digital Man Cave podcast, which was a much looser format with a lot of friends and a little different feel, but Geek Homeworld kind of morphed out of that. Anyway, so it was also with Libsyn, and I went with Libsyn because people that I follow in the podcast world, I searched around on the internet at the time years ago, and I've been very happy with Libsyn. Libsyn is great about hosting. Their servers are hardly ever down. I can only remember like once or twice they were down for maintenance, but they let you know, and it's a great place to have your RSS feed, and you want to have that. But there are some services like Anchor, and I do have some of these podcasts. I send them to Anchor, and but Anchor does, I think, control that RSS feed, and to an extent, wherever you have your RSS feed, you can own it, and all that. But that's something to think about, and that's a little next level stuff. But owning your RSS feed is very important. But more importantly, you got to have a home for your podcast. So you want to have that website, that web hosting site. In addition, and it's not on the notes here, because I'm trying not to go off topic here, but you probably want to have a good, solid website that can be different than the podcast landing site, basically the hosting site of your podcast. But, it's totally up to you what you want to do and what's within your budget. You don't have to spend tremendous amounts of money to podcast. You can do it virtually for free. And my whole thing has been, not just for economic sake, but from the beginning, has been pretty much all about doing it as cheaply as possible, almost as free as I can, with as little expense. I'm going to spin around just a second in my chair here. If you're watching the YouTube video, you'll see that I have this Blue Yeti mic, and everybody has this mic, and they have one that comes in black, and now they come in different colors, which is an XLR connection, which is much better than the USB. But, if you're just a podcaster, you can do that. You'll see that right next to it, there's a pop filter, and it's, some people back in the day, they would use pantyhose they would put over the microphone. This microphone I have in the shot here, it's got a windscreen on it. And so there are different ways of doing it, but depending on your interface, I've got an interface. And I'm going to do very soon, I plan to do a studio tour and kind of show you my setup. And I've just got a little bit of straightening up and a few things I want to move around before I do that. So, it's a work in progress, but you don't have to have a great big studio. You want to have a place that's relatively quiet when you're podcasting. That's important. Those things are important. So hopefully you're still there with me, okay? So we decided on a hosting site. And it looks like I already went into number 5. Equipment is important, but content is imperative. And that's extremely true. You can have the best, most expensive microphones, You can have all the expensive equipment, hosting services, everything else. But if your content isn't good, if your content is boring, or how you present your content isn't exciting enough, or, whatever, if your content is just poor content, no amount of money you spend is going to matter. It's useless to buy ads. It's useless to do all this promotion on social media for your podcast if you don't have anything to say. So that's why you go back to some of the earlier things in this list, like especially at the top here, knowing your niche, knowing what your podcast is, planning it out, what you're going to do beforehand, okay? And, and that's what I show there on 5A here is all the best equipment setup means nothing if you do not have good content. And then 5B on here is draw your listeners in with interesting content that answers questions, entertains, and keeps them coming back for more. You want to hook people into coming back. Honestly, though, in an honest way. You're not trying to be deceptive or anything, but you want to give people a reason to come back and listen to your content. Or when your video shows up, make sure you do a nice thumbnail on that for your video, on YouTube so that people recognize it. Or if they recognize your brand, you have a certain logo that they see, part of your branding. You want to make sure that that's all in line because they'll know if they see Geek Homeworld, they'll know, oh, they've got something about geek culture. It's in the title, right? And that's another thing, that goes back kind of with number one on this list of naming your podcast for what you're going to be talking about. If we're the Geek Homeworld, I wouldn't be talking about planting flowers. It's just not, it's not in the title. So it's not what we're doing here. But now that I think of it, planting flowers sounds like that could be a very interesting podcast. So maybe that's a hobby kind of podcast or something I could start on the side. Who knows? I'll leave that to one of you guys out there that are watching and listening. So let me know your thoughts on that. Maybe you already have a podcast, and it could be fascinating. Not belittling that because, hey, you never know. Number 6, very important. Listen to your listeners. You want to read your comments and respond to all listeners, especially when starting your podcast. I've been blessed enough that people have liked my content and left very nice comments. Will you get bigger eventually? Yes, in the podcasting world, you will grow if you really apply yourself and put all these other strategies, not just these, but other strategies and what works for you. When you employ all these strategies, you will get better. But in this world, you can't do good without a little bit of hate showing up, and you got to know how to deal with the love-hate. And I've been lucky enough that people have not sent much hate my way. I'm not a hateful person, so I treat others the way that I think I should be treated, and I think that's how you ought to too. And I'm sure that you do. If you're watching this podcast, you're a good person, and you like geek culture, you like geeky things, and you like the escapism of talking about the next Marvel film or the DC film or Star Wars or Star Trek or who knows, or maybe the latest geek gadget or something, the latest phone you might be talking about. We don't do as much gadgets as we did before in my previous podcast reviews, but who knows what the future holds. I got some big plans. And I do have a Discord that I started for Geek Homeworld. On Discord, it's Geek Homeworld. And I forgot to mention that. I meant to mention that earlier, but I'm new at Discord, so I'm still figuring it out. But anyway, you're welcome to join the Discord, and we can talk there. Or on Geek Homeworld, on Twitter at Geek Homeworld, you can always hit us up there. Or if you're on YouTube, leave something in the comments and all that, and we appreciate it, and we'll get back to you on that. But listening to your listeners is very important. You can also always find topics that your people are interested in. The people that watch your videos or listen to your podcast, whether it's a video podcast like on YouTube or if it's just an audio podcast, your listeners may say, I'm big on top 10 lists, and 2020, I actually have a plan. We were going to do a friend of mine who's part of the podcast, who contributes a lot. We were going to do, we drew it all out from the entire film industry, from the beginning of film into at least, I think, 2020, or at least 2019. We had done, well, since 2020 started a new decade, so we had all the decades basically done in film, and eventually I'm going to put those episodes out, so you'll see a long train of them. But it was supposed to come earlier in 2020, and that just didn't happen. So anyway, I don't want to, there's a tangent. See, now there's a tangent. That could be a good tangent. It could be a bad tangent. But I like to think that it's, whatever it is. So I've lost my train of thought. But here's something that's important. I know podcasters who have started podcasts, and then they do what has been referred to as pod fading. Or, they get tired of their podcast, and some people, will podcast for a bit, and then they will just abandon their podcast, or life gets in the way, as I say, and that's fine, and sometimes you got to take a break, family issues, life, whatever. We're in the middle of a pandemic still, November of 2020 when I'm recording this. So, there are reasons that stopping your podcast or not putting out an episode, people will understand. Just always communicate and let your followers know that. Even if it's a quick episode, a quick little note, or some shout out on your social media, and just let them know, that, hey, I need some time off, but I'll be back, such and such. People will appreciate that. Your followers will appreciate that very much so. But number 7 is record or batch 5 episodes before you release. And why 5 episodes? 5, well, I was going to say that's a good round number, but that's showing my math skills there. It's not a round number, but it's kind of a rule of thumb that if you are psyched up, because when you're starting a podcast, you're very psyched up. You're psyched up more than anybody about that podcast, okay? So if you record 5 episodes, and they don't have to be long, drawn-out episodes. Most people consume shorter episodes. Our attention spans are -0. I don't know, -5 at this point. I don't even think people have attention spans anymore. And that's fine. I'm kind of that way too, and to be honest with you. Life seems to move at such a rapid pace that sometimes we forget. So batching 5 episodes is a good thing, because if you do that, you will end up having episodes that are in the can, as they say. So let's say while you're thinking up or outlining other topics, which hopefully you had already outlined some topics, but maybe you don't have any beyond 5, and you record those 5, boom, 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 boom. Then you release them, boom, once a week, or one a month, or every 2 weeks, or whatever your release schedule is for your podcast. You decide that. It's your podcast. Okay? So having those 5 episodes, it could be 4, it could be 6, it could be whatever you're comfortable with, but batching a few of those, and this can also help. Well, let me finish that sentence first. But batching those can help, because in case you quote unquote pod fade, and a lot of people don't like to say that anymore, but it kind of explains it when your podcast just kind of fades away. It's like your favorite podcast ghosted you or something, and people, you'll lose audiences that way. But many podcasts fail because they get ready to record and then they have nothing planned for those future episodes. So that's why it's important. Now, if later on, let's say you've got a surgery coming up, and you're going to be, let's say you put out an episode a month, okay? Which isn't hard to do. Sometimes it is. Believe me, it is. Because it's not about quality. Strike that. It's not about quantity. The algorithm may tell you that it's all about quantity over quality. But honestly, your audience still believes in quality over quantity. So you can find the mix of that if you're on something like YouTube or whatever. You definitely want to be consistently putting out whatever your schedule is, episodes of your podcast. But if you're putting out, terrible episodes, you're going to lose listeners, and it's just, not worth it. So you're just wasting time if you're putting out, just garbage or what they perceive as not your best. So it's important to put out quality over quantity. And, but let's say you've got a surgery and you're going to be off 2 months. Okay. You need 2 months to recuperate. Okay. And let's say you're putting out an episode a month. Okay. Then if you did 5 episodes, that covers you for 5 months. Another thing is, and it depends on your podcast, and this is veering a little bit off the list here, but I promise I won't go too far veering off. But some people talk about, it is your podcast. Regardless of what anybody says, it is your podcast. You are a content creator. You're creating it. It's what message you want to get across. And that message may change over time, and that's fine. But you want to make sure that you're being honest and true to what your podcast is about. And having an outline of episodes that can carry you through, like taking off a couple months of recovery, is great. You may not want to, and this is what I was kind of getting at, is that some people make videos that are topical, or they're very much in the moment, and there's nothing wrong with like reaction videos. Which reaction videos, I mean, they can have a bit of a shelf life, but if you really want people, especially on YouTube, to like the content that you're doing, of course, if your podcast addresses like the next film release, which we do a lot of that. Right now the industry is trying to crank back up, and in some ways it has, in some ways it hasn't completely. So, a lot of our content here on Geek Homeworld is topical, or it's, top films of 2019 or something like that. It's a great time capsule. I love top 10 lists. That's something I always have enjoyed. But the thing about it is, if you think about it, and, there is there's time and place for that, certainly. But if you're making a podcast about the iPhone 5, in 2020, that's really not relevant to anybody, because we're on the iPhone 12 just came out. So, think of it like that. So if you're trying to stay with the times, it depends on what your podcast is about. And some people do an excellent job of staying completely away from dates like that, or, stuff that can become dated, like episodes that can become dated. We have a lot of episodes that maybe you could consider that, and that's me being honest. But I look at them more as time capsules of that time and that place and what our thoughts were at the time when we were talking about whatever we were talking about. And it's a little different when you look back at films and you're like the best Star Wars films, or the best, whatever, top 10 Star Trek episodes, or the Next Generation episodes, or, original series, or whatever, And those can exist, and those can be kind of timeless, and they can be fun to go back and look at. And so there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to make quote unquote timeless episodes, how do I don't know, 10 strategies for starting a podcast. This could be considered a timeless video. But there may be elements in this particular video right now, in this podcast, that if you listen 6 months from now, or if you listen a year from now, may not be as relevant. There may be companies I mention or something that are no longer available. There may be stuff from years ago that I'm sure there is, that we podcasted about, stuff that's not around anymore, That's just, technology changes so dramatically. So it can happen. But you want to make an outline of topics for the episodes that you can add value to your listeners within your niche. That's, if you're following along on the list on the screen, that would be 7B. So number 8 is stay consistent with your release schedule. And we kind of touched on this earlier. Your subscribers, your listeners, your followers, whatever, they like your consistency. Give them what they want when they expect it. And if something's coming up and you can't give them what they expect it, first off, the show must go on, okay? But if you can't, if you let them know in advance, like if they are waiting for your next episode that's coming out this Saturday, and then Saturday goes by and they hear nothing, and nothing from you on social media or on any of your platforms, then they might give you a pass, or they might hit you up online and say, hey, what's up? Is there a new episode coming out? Or, if there are people that still blog, and, nothing against that, and now people do vlogs, of course, but even with vlogs, if you think about that, when people are like, well, why is it, or YouTube videos, why has it been so long? Or podcast episodes, they'll ask, why has it been so long since your last episode? You'll usually hear that content creator come on and say, in that returning episode, they'll say, hey, such and such happened, blah, blah, blah. And yes, it's good to apologize to your audience, but you need to respect them too. And you need to let them know, and, a shout out on the, just a quick message on your social media. Hey, there's not going to be a live call-in show this week due to such and such, but we'll be back next week, or something like that. So you want to stay consistent with your release schedule. That's number 8. Number 9, do not be afraid to grow with your podcast or change things up if they are not getting the results you want. That says it all. Your podcast will change. The 6 years that I've been doing this podcast, it has changed. The focus has changed a little bit. It's still pretty much the same, but I have so many ideas of directions I want to take it into that I haven't totally done with it yet. And so that's part of growing. The technology has gotten better. I've been able and lucky enough, I guess, and to upgrade equipment, computers, and different things over time. And I can't do it as much as I'd like to, but who knows? Maybe one day. But you have to work with what you have. And so all you need, like I showed you here on my shelf here, the little USB Yeti mic. A lot of professional podcasters and YouTubers frown when they see those, but we all had that mic at some point. And there's people that still use that have millions of followers, that do use the video camera that's in their laptop or their computer. I, of course, have a one that plugs into this USB hub that I have, and so it's a Logitech cam, and I love it. It's helped me really get the resolution I was looking for to do proper YouTube videos or video versions of the podcast, of the audio podcast. So it's allowed me to do some other things. So, with that technology, with that equipment, and we kind of touched on equipment earlier, equipment is not everything. It is a big, important part of your podcast, especially if it's into video. Well, if it's audio, that's all they've got is what people hear, right? So your sound's got to be impeccable. Is it going to be great from the beginning? No. And here's the thing. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to fail. You are going to make mistakes. You're going to listen to stuff that you've recorded. I may listen to this episode back and go, oh gosh, why did I say that? Why did I do that? Why was I looking away from the camera? Why did I not look at the camera? I have to realize there's a camera there and look at it. Sometimes I forget that. And there's things like that, and that's fine. But you're going to grow. You're going to make mistakes. It's like people in the film industry. When you start out, you're going to make mistakes on your films. You're going to do those student films. You're going to do those films that are ultra low budgets or no budgets or whatever. That's where you make your mistakes. That's where you learn. That's where you grow from. And you can grow, and you will grow, and you are going to grow. We're all growing. It never ends. Remember, it's not a destination. It's a journey that you're on. And you're a content creator. You have wonderful things to say. You have exciting, wonderful perspectives. And a video these days can change a person's life. It can inspire millions. You can be that content creator that inspires millions. And you don't have to inspire everyone, but be inspired yourself and be honest and true about what you're passionate about. And that kind of goes into number 10, our final thing on our 10 strategies for starting a podcast. Enjoy the ride. Number 10. If you do not have a passion for what you are podcasting about, then your audience will sense that from you. Be excited about what you were talking about. If I sat here dull and boring and just talked on and droned on about this and such, and I've had episodes where I was tired and that I shouldn't have recorded. I'm my own biggest critic. There's nothing you can say to me that I haven't probably already said to myself. Or, that's the thing about being a creator. And I spent hours upon hours just, was there too many lip smacks? Was there too many ums? Was there too many editing stuff to death until it almost sounded unnatural. And after a while, I was like, you know what? It's more work than it's worth. You want to put out good quality, but the thing is you learn not to make those audio ticks, those audio mistakes or whatever. I'm learning on video to look at the camera more. And sometimes I guess I'm supposed to look away and then look at the camera. But when I'm looking at the camera, I feel like I'm engaging with you directly, with you, the listener. And that's what I want to do. And of course, if you're listening to my voice, all you have is my voice. So my voice has to be compelling. It has to tell you to follow your dreams, to enjoy this new iPhone 12 you have, or whatever we're talking about, or your 10 strategies for starting a podcast. So these principles can be applied to a lot of things in life. And but this is your podcast. Remember that. Your podcast is your podcast. And this is a 10B on the list here. This is your podcast, but always keep your focus on enjoying the ride along with your listeners. Your listeners will go anywhere. Your listeners will make you famous. Eventually, if you get enough listeners, enough dedicated ones, they will buy merchandise that you put on your podcast. If you get to that point, they will. If you're selling a product, if you're going to work your way up and becoming a spokesperson, if you go around talking about podcasts, or you go around, which is something I've thought about doing. I've thought about going around and teaching about how to podcast. I know other people that have done it, and I know people that make six figures easily. And no, this is not an commercial for anybody, but I have a handful of people that I look up to, that I've learned from. And that's the thing about it. Be authentic, but everyone, and I hate to say the word steal, but that's not the right word. It's more like emulate. But it's okay to emulate, to imitate, to take some of those best practices that you've seen people who are now, even if they're in your mind, giants in the industry. They may not be a household name, but they may be people that you follow and you look up to. And never underestimate how much power you have in the sense that of influence that you have for others. And I'm big on teaching and training and giving back. And that's something that I've had the ability to do working in the film industry and like the radio show that I do, Savannah on Film. I'd like to put a spotlight, as I say, on some content creators that are coming up, some filmmakers, in different departments. I like to give other people a chance. Not that I'm someone great and fantastic and wonderful, but maybe to them it makes a difference. And even if it's in your community, as long as you're making a difference, as long as you are inspiring others, then what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with inspiring people to do good things. And believe it or not, you may not feel appreciated. You may feel underappreciated. In fact, you may feel like, well, no one's listening to my podcast. Well, maybe, hopefully, these 10 strategies for starting a podcast, this is to get your feet wet, as it were. The basic things, and some of them are a little bit advanced, and you can get very advanced, like I said, but some of these are to get you into the mindset of starting a podcast, because you can succeed. You will succeed. You are going to succeed. Can I guarantee that these work? These things, and I'm showing a little paper here. You can't see that, but because I printed it out, because I still use a printer. When you get a little bit older like me, you can't see the screen as well. But if you put these 10 strategies for starting a podcast into practice, I think you'll be successful. I am not guaranteeing in any way, a big disclaimer here, but generally speaking, if you follow these, you're going to be doing well. And I have a lot to learn. That's what I like, is I never say that I've reached the pinnacle, even if in some things in life I maybe have reached an intellectual pinnacle of things, of understanding things, certain things. No, we always have room to grow. There's always a better way to do things. There's always a better way to a better strategy to achieve what you're trying to achieve with your podcast, with whatever you're doing. So whether it be a podcast, whether it be YouTube, your video podcast, your vlog, whatever you want to call it, wherever it resides, these are some strategies I think that can help you. And you can always hit us up at Geek Homeworld. If you've got some questions or comments, please leave some comments about the video. I'd love some comments about the video. This has gone on a little bit longer than I planned, but there's a tangent. I just, I care enough about these things that I've presented here that I want to impress upon you who is watching this video, who is maybe hearing this podcast. I want you to know that you have a voice, and in this world today, it's important for people's voices, all different types of voices, to be heard. So maybe these 10 strategies for starting a podcast can get you on your way, on that journey, not the destination, right? It's not the destination. It's about the journey. It's about the journey. It's about enjoying the ride. It's about enjoying what you're doing and maybe helping others along the way and giving back in that sense. So these strategies, I hope you will find these 10 strategies for starting a podcast. I hope that this has been helpful to you, and I hope that you will find some value in it, and that that you will definitely prosper in your podcast. And that is my hope. And I hope that you continue to grow and evolve, and just, I need to end it with some great saying, and I don't have one yet. So, anyway, I just want to say thank you. How about that? That's a great way to end it. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please subscribe on YouTube. Give it a thumbs up to the video. Leave your comments. You can hit us up at Geek Homeworld on Twitter. That's at Geek Homeworld on Twitter. We're on Facebook. You can follow and like us over there. We're always posting stuff on Geek Homeworld at Facebook. Don't forget Geek Homeworld Gaming, which is also on Facebook. And you'll see the videos from my Geek Homeworld Gaming. I've been cross-posting those to the Geek Homeworld YouTube channel here. And it really helps with those subscribers and those thumbs up, and you enabling notifications for new content here on Geek Homeworld at YouTube, on YouTube. And if you like the film industry, we do talk about that here on the podcast, but I have Sven on Film, which is on Facebook, that you can like and follow there. I'm got a great amount of content over there, and been doing that show for a couple of years at least. And it's also in podcast form, just like this Geek Homeworld podcast. Our main site for the podcast is geekhomeworld.libsyn.com. I don't think I mentioned that. I did say I was with Libsyn. And by the way, no products, no companies mentioned in this video. sponsored this video. There's no sponsorship for this video, whatever. It's just these are all my personal opinions. These 10 strategies for starting a podcast are just things I've observed over the years. I just sat down today and I wrote out these ideas and I said, these are some things I think that can help others. This is a way of me giving back to you and giving you some quality content. And with that, this video's gone on long enough. Thank you for everyone who stuck in here for the whole thing, who watches us on a replay and everything else. And please tell all your friends about us and Geek Homeworld. And thank you so very much. And I'm your host, Ed, at Geek Homeworld. And thank you for listening. Goodbye. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Geek Homeworld with your host, Ciucevich Techman. You can find us on Libsyn, Google+, follow and interact with us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, listen to us on iTunes and leave a review, subscribe to us on YouTube, read our thoughts on Blogger. See you again on the Geek Homeworld.